Day 2 of rebuilding a Land Rover, and it is raining. So the first thing we're going to do is go inside and prepare the new Maer galvanised chassis. So here it is. 109 military combat chassis with the dual spring mounts, side mounted fuel tank. The first thing we're going to do is fit the axles, which we took off yesterday, because then that will get it off the ground and we can fit the brake pipes, the steering relay. What else have we got? There's a few holes to drill for brackets and things like that, and that just makes it a little bit more pleasant being lifted up. So we've got to roll it onto its side, roll the axle in, back down, and then we'll fit it with new Britpart parabolic springs. So as we said before, this is a re-chassis job rather than a full rebuild, so we haven't stripped the axles down. We're literally taking them off the old chassis and putting them straight on the new one.
It's far easier moving a chassis like this than an axle like this when there's wheels on it.
Is there going to be space for the chassis to come back down?
Yep.
Right then, gently does it. Careful in case it slides. Is there space? Yes. Cool. So now, chassis bushes. This is a genuine Land Rover chassis bush, and it's what we're going to fit to the new chassis. Basically, these are an interference fit in the tubes, which are built into the chassis, so they need to be pulled in. And to do that, I'm going to use a piece of threaded rod and a couple of sockets. So we'll fit this now, and it's got to go in nice and straight, so we'll be careful and check it along the way. It's really important to take the time to get these bushes in straight, because if you don't, you'll get to a certain point and it will bind up, and the metal on the outside of the bush can get damaged. So just be sure they are 100% true in the socket in the chassis before you pull it through. Once the bush is in place, just have a look at either side and make sure that the bush is central in the chassis and that one side isn't sticking out further than the other. If it is, just even it up with the tool that you use to fit it. What you'll often find when fitting a new galvanised chassis is that quite a few of the fittings and places where bolts and things go are quite tight. That's often because there's excess galv on the surfaces, so you might need to take a few minutes just to file down that excess galvanised material as you fit things. For instance, the springs are a little bit of a tight fit here, so we just spend a little while with a file putting that right, and then we can bolt the front edge of the spring into the spring hanger.
Martin, can you, when you've got your gloves on, can you lift the back of it up?
Yeah.
And because that will help me to swing low. It wasn't sprung steel and springing back in place.
Quick project update. Neil's beavering away in the background there. The back axle's on and we're going to start on the front, but you'll notice we're using different types of leaf springs. So this is a standard multi-leaf Land Rover spring. As you can see, it's called multi-leaf because it has multiple leaves, but no gaps in between. And as these get old, they sort of bind up and start sticking, and they really kill the ride quality and you know, make it quite a harsh place to be, even harsher than normal on a series Land Rover. So I'm going to retire these and fit these, which are parabolics from Britpart. As you can see, these only have 2 leaves and they have an air gap between, so they respond to bumps in the road a lot better because there's not that friction between the leaves. They're not quite as good for carrying heavy loads, but I only really use my Land Rover for camping, so not too much of a problem. We're going for 2 leaf on the front and 3 leaf on the back. which is probably about right for an unladen truck cab. So let's crack on. Here I'm fitting new shackle plates to one end of the spring. These are available in a variety of lengths depending on whether you've got an 88 or a 109, and extra long ones for military vehicles. Again, because these parabolics will give us a little bit of a lift anyway, we're going for standard 109-inch ones rather than the extended military versions. And if they're not high enough, then I can always tweak it later.
You can also get the prop shafts on while it's in here. Same having to lie on the dirt.
Yeah, sounds good. What we're doing at the front and the back of the chassis is securing the spring at the inboard end, then rolling the axle into place and locating it on the pin which is in the centre of the spring. Once that's loosely bolted on, we'll then jack the axle up and locate the front of the spring into the hanger on the chassis. That seems to be the easiest way of doing it. Obviously there's a lot of different ways you can go about this, but over the years Neil's found that the easiest, and who am I to argue? So that's what we're doing.
So that's good enough.
Cool.
Right.
So the new chassis is almost rolling. It's a good idea to go from the back to the front of the old one and just make sure we haven't missed anything, because we're going to want to get rid of this out of the way and we want to be able to work on it at a sensible height. So the wiring loom we've got a replacement for, so that can stay there. Just work forward. Got new dampers, so they can stay. We'll have to take this off. That's a stay for the tub, same as the other side. Working forward again, we're replacing brake pipes, so that doesn't matter. Need to remove this bit of fuel pipe and a gearbox mount there. That will get moved onto the new chassis with a new bush. More brake pipe, other end of the loom. Need to take the horn off, missed that. And the steering relay, we'll try and remove this, but I have got a new one, so not the end of the world if that has to stay there. So a couple of little bits to do, and then we'll get this chassis moved and get the axle under the new one. Thankfully by this point the rain had stopped, which is good, because once this front axle's in place we can roll the chassis and the axles outside and work on it there. Leaving the wheels on the axle makes it nice and easy to move around, but the extra weight of the differential causes the casing to rotate on itself, so that's a bit of a fiddle, but it's a lot easier than trying to drag it around on gravel with a trolley jack or whatever. So front axle goes on next, and then roll it all outside.
Pop those the weasel. Not quite. Goes the weasel. Good stiff.
What a thing of beauty. As you can see, the rolling chassis has been assembled. The axles are on, the new springs are on, and we're going to have a little look at the Maer galvanised chassis. So this is different from the one that we've removed because, for a start, it's made out of flat plate, so there's no seam along the middle. That means that Maer have been able to use stronger, thicker metal. This is their heavy duty chassis, so it's stronger in all the places it needs to be. There's fewer mud traps, so it's less likely to rust, even though being galvanised, it shouldn't rust anyway. And there's a few nice little tweaks that have meant that all the muck and salt and rubbish that fly off your wheels won't be crammed into nooks and crannies and create a corrosion problem. So yeah, it's really heavy. Moving it around, we've had to use quite a lot of manpower to shift it in and out. But that means, because it is made of thicker metal, it's going to be heavier than the old one. Being the military chassis, we've got the twin spring holes on the front and rear spring mounts. Because we've gone for parabolic springs, which generally raise the height a little bit, I've gone from the higher setting, which is the lower hole, to the lower setting, which is this one. Once the engine is in, the body's on, and it's settled, I can then adjust the ride height if I need to bring it down at the back or up at the front, anything like that. So this is where we're at. Next, we'll put the steering relay in and route the wiring harness, fit the engine and gearbox, and carry on rebuilding. There is something really satisfying about having a brand new chassis. This is the first one I've done for myself, and it's really, really nice to work with something that's clean and brand new. Even though the parts we're fitting to it are used, it's, yeah, it really is a nice moment in the build. As we look around that beautiful new Maer galvanised chassis, now's a good time to remind you of all the other cool stuff we get up to on Land Rover Monthly. Of course, there's the monthly magazine, which you can buy in shops or subscribe to, weekly podcast, social media channels, and of course YouTube. So give us a like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. And yeah, thank you for your continued support.
Look at my vehicle. Looking at you.
As Neil removes some bits from the old tub that we'll need to transfer over to the new one, here's a little look at just how much space a stripped down Land Rover can take up. Obviously it helps to be a bit more organised than this, but don't underestimate just how much room you might need.
Oh, sorry. Need to get the WD-40.
I did have the foresight to order a set of auto mech brake pipes for this job, which come pre-made. You just have to bend them to shape. But I must have got the year wrong and some of the fittings were incorrect, so I've had to cut the ends off some of them and change them, and also just make up a couple from fresh brake pipe. Bit of a pain, but you run into these things when doing a rebuild, so not the end of the world. So you might have noticed this piece of copper pipe that we've got running through the inside of the chassis. I did that earlier in preparation to fit the new wiring loom. So that pipe runs all the way from the back out to the front, where it disappears up the bulkhead. Neil has been busy taping the new Auto Sparks wiring loom to that piece of brake pipe, which we will now use to pull the wiring loom all the way through the chassis rail, so it will be protected from dirt and elements and things like that. So, you ready?
Give it a go.
I'll let you into a little behind the scenes secret here. This method did not work. The piece of copper pipe went through the chassis absolutely fine, but by the time it had the chassis harness taped to it, the whole lot was just way too thick and we couldn't get it through the chassis rails, no matter how hard we tried. So we abandoned this and actually used MIG wire later on. I've got some footage of that, so I'll be sure to drop that in the next video. But yeah, it's one of those things. To be fair, I should have storyboarded this, because that would have added even more confusion. Because the brake pipes on the old chassis were such a mess, I was determined to make a nice job of the new ones. Something that makes that a lot easier is a pair of these pliers, brake pipe bending pliers, which let you get nice 90-degree bends in the new pipe. Britpart sell these under DA 7440. A really handy bit of kit, and yeah, they make shaping the brake pipes a lot easier. This pipe here you're looking at is from the Auto Mech kit, which was DA 7410. Cut to length already and fitted with the unions, so it just speeds the process up. Okay, so the time has come to put the engine and gearbox back in. You may remember me saying that the engine sat over too far to one side, so what I've done is fit a 10mm thick plate between the engine mount and the block, which will shift the engine over to the driver's side. To facilitate that, we've drilled an extra hole, or enlarged the hole, on the engine mount on the chassis, just to let the engine mount stud fit in there, and then that will centralise the engine and cure a lot of problems that I had with this before we took it apart.
Profanities.
Basically, I want some of the shiny new chassis in the foreground and the
Shiny old engine in the background.
I want parts of Neil's happy LRM faces.
Not like handbrake springs, fella. I think that's as hard as it's going to go. Just grab that spring off the ground, please.
Oh, you want me to reach it underneath the really badly?
No, it's hot. Very
You wanted just to spring into action.
This is all right.
Is it going to roll if I leave it?
No, we've got to move it anyway because.
As we mentioned previously, because we're doing this primarily on a gravel driveway, we're rolling the chassis around rather than moving the crane, simply because the weight of the engine and gearbox is quite a lot, and we wouldn't want to make the crane unstable trying to move it on gravel. Luckily, with no bodywork on, it's fairly straightforward getting everything lined up. You can just about see I've got new rubber mounts on the engine and the gearbox. They're actually from Glencoyne Engineering, who writes Norfolk Garage for Land Rover Monthly magazine. So many of you will have enjoyed his columns over the years, and he sells parts as well. So if you're after some of your own, you can get them on eBay. The mounts use a special rubber which is really good at isolating vibration, which is perfect for things like TDI conversions in series Land Rovers. So be sure to check them out. Lower her down and she'll go backwards a bit.
Yep.
Oh, we're going to have the same issue. This shit's going to be in the way of the pumpy.
Right, Tom. What do you want? What sort of picture do you want?
So I want you and Martin's facing, so if Martin can come round here, you can get in nice and tight, even tight, that's it. That's it, you're obscuring that red car in the background.
Because we're doing this job for the magazine as well as for YouTube, we have to pause every now and again and let Tom, the photographer, take his photos. And yeah, it does slow the job down a bit, but it's all part of the fun. What happens next, though, is what happens when the jack handle binds against the leaf spring and you can't adjust it slowly enough.
Whoa!
Sorry. It's because... Right. It's not hit anything, has it?
It's sitting on the chassis, so
Look, it's jacked up a bit.
if it can go up a bit. I might have a shorter handle. There is quite a lot of weight on it because I can see the whole engine mount is like massively. There is a lot of weight on there.
Just let it settle. Yeah. Right. Yeah, because we've got to lift this into platform and shove that thing that might come down and slide back further.
Yeah.
Right, mind your fingers.
Yep. Right,
can
stop.
we get some bolts in?
Yep. Mint. From the top.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not going up because of...
I'm just
the
dropping. You've
Okay.
no fingers clear.
I think that pipe, Tom's side, has to go over the cross member and this one comes
Yeah.
under it. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does.
So,
That's all right.
stupid. We were having a bit of fun at this point. Obviously, because this Land Rover is V8 converted, it has different exhaust system at the front. The Y pipe passes underneath the main cross member at the front, but because it's in two halves, I'd forgotten which way around they went. And the exhaust's a pain to wangle into place whilst the engine's in. So we were trying to position it before we dropped the engine down all the way. But yeah, it all got a bit confusing. Yeah, that can hang on there.
So that will be
That can just has to be just loose in position.
right. So if it's like that, it's fine.
Should be, yeah.
Right.
Right, ready? This is where it's going to get a bit brute forcey, I think, to get the engine on its mounts. But come down a bit. Ready?
Yep.
Oh, it's got loads of. We're there. So we're not far off straight ahead actually. You might have to come forward a bit, the engine box.
If I sit on here and just kick it forward,
Yeah. Will I be alright to come down?
It needs to go forward. Can somebody keep an eye on that? The pressure thing. Right. The thing which is
with the little spade terminal on it.
What we're actually trying to remember the name of here is the oil pressure switch, which screws into the oil filter housing. As I mentioned before, this is an engine from a V8 101 forward control, so the oil filter's flipped up nice and clear of the axle. However, as we drop the engine down, the oil pressure switch is ever so close to the engine mount on the chassis, so we're just trying to wangle the engine around that to try and prevent damage to the sensor as we lower the engine down.
I've got an idea. In that bar.
You can see how much resistance there is on the engine crane as you try and move it even without an engine hanging from it, so it would have been a complete non-starter to try and move the engine around on top of the chassis. Again, another bonus to having the axles on and it rolling around means that it's easy to manoeuvre, and after a bit of jiggery pokery we got the engine sat in with no damage to any sensors or the exhaust.
As you can see, the engine and gearbox are now in the chassis, but it's getting on in the day now. It's raining, it's going to get dark soon, so we need to crack on and get the bulkhead on. Once that's on, we're going to support it loosely. Obviously we've got that repair to do on the foot, then the tub's going to go on and it will start looking a whole lot more like a Land Rover. So let's get the team together, get that bulkhead on.
Tom, that end that's the heavy end, this end is the light end.
You may remember from our previous strip down video, we had a bit of an issue getting the bulkhead off, simply because the driver's side is so heavy it tries to tilt back and forth, and the bulkhead foot on the driver's side is also rotted away and snapped off, so there's a jagged bit of metal poking out the bottom. We got Tom, the photographer, to help us out to lift it back on. It's still a bit fiddly, and it does try and tilt back and forth, but we got there in the end, and once it's in place and secured with all the other bolts, I'll get that foot replaced.
Steve,
Okay.
you sure?
Yep. Stop.
Sorry, Neil. Okay.
Right, yeah. Okay. Right, put it on me.
Set it down.
Yep. Right.
Say when.
Alright, I'm good. Right, and now rock in position. Right. Okay. Just gonna nudge this forward a little bit. Right, I'm in action position, that's in position.
It's as good as it's going to be.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
No, thank you. Sorry I pushed you off the edge.
Right. Well, Steve was videoing, that's the important bit.
We have it on camera.
Good.
And they still offer 250 quid for videos that go wrong.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
We couldn't resist grabbing the new tub and setting it in place on the new chassis. It will have to come back off again because there's still that wiring harness to do and a lot of other bits and pieces going on underneath, but we thought as it was raining and getting dark we would finish the day on a high, so we got the new tub out and just mocked it up.
Sort of on.
Now we need to go forwards.
Ready? Yep.
Right, now we can nudge it back.
Let me see your faces, just for a switch it.
Alright. There we go, we're on. Oh, it's green, isn't it?
It is.
Like potatoes and like that for a long time. Oh, without a tub on it.
Should we do a smiley face over the wet smiley faces over the back?
You know what we haven't done?
Oh,
Put the loom on.
it's alright, that can be fitted around and above. To be honest.
So there you have it. After 2 days we have a rolling chassis with the engine and gearbox in and the bulkhead on. A lot further forward than I thought we would get, but obviously there's still a lot to do. The bulkhead needs repairing, the rest of the bodywork needs fitting, and we need to do a lot of finishing off. So be sure to keep up with it in Land Rover Monthly, and of course right here on our YouTube channel, and we will also be chatting about it on the LRM podcast, so have a listen to that too. Catch you on the next one.